I am back now. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
My power
the
just
powers.
flickered and I saw it happen and I was like, oh, fucking shit.
The general universal powers are trying to shut us down.
Apparently.
Ah, shit. But sadly, thanks to the focus on ADHD, I literally can't remember what I was talking about 2 seconds ago now.
I believe the last
Uh,
thing that we were talking about was the the tendency of the average populace nowadays to look to assign blame rather than figure out a solution.
yeah. So okay. Let's go backtrack that. Yeah. So what I was saying was is that basically it's the solution side to it is hard because people try to always think big because that is how we're taught to be. As a kind of backtracking and summarizing what I'm probably making too long. Um, if you try and think, how do I save 1,000 people or 10,000 people? Those people become numbers, not people, and you lose the ability to comprehend them. So I think the best solution to this is the idea of the notions of community and small communities, be they physically be local or be they small communities that are across the world digitally. But small communities work because you can comprehend the people inside them. You can be human to human, and you can act how you want to act, make your choices and decisions to be different, and therefore show how you can be different. And that is far more powerful and long-standing than just telling people they're wrong or telling people they've got to change. You know, it's like don't come to me talking about climate protest if you sat in Starbucks on your MacBook. You know, which I've seen plenty of environmentalists I know do. It's like it doesn't. It's the hypocrisy runs too high.
Right? And I mean, I
Yeah.
agree. Definitely, the climate is a problem. There needs to be something done about that. Am I doing every single thing I possibly can? Absolutely not. So I'm not going out there and looking down on other people for, not doing similar things. Am I doing some of the things? Absolutely, because it is a problem that we need to fix. I also
But we,
understand that individual action can only do so much in the face of this crisis, that the
we should,
majority of the problem is coming from those who are in power, the elites in the current system, and the
there's
structures on which it is designed.
there is two other really important parts to it, and one is that you have to celebrate the things that are done, not just shit on the things that are not. And the
Exactly.
second part, the second part, which I think is actually more important, is that we have it. If we say we need things to change now, and when I say now, let's say, for example, let's say I'm sitting here saying I really hope things change by the time I'm dead, or in my lifetime. I want to see it. Well, the level of hubris for me to think that as a species we can get our shit together in a couple of decades or so, it's insane. Like we need to say, right, what do we do now to embed the seeds of something so that people 2 or 3 generations on from now are going to live better. Like, it's selfish to think, how do we solve this for us now? 20 years from now, we're going to be choking. That's just a given. What do we put in motion now so we can help the people 2, 3 generations on? We have to be selfless in the solution, you know?
Yeah, I feel like previous generations, and this might not be true for everybody, but as a whole, I feel like previous generations cared more about what they were passing on than the more recent generations. And I feel like that is a pendulum that is starting to swing back. Like the Gen Z and a lot of the younger millennials are a lot more interested and more active in trying to create that better world to pass on.
Yeah, if there was some sort of like, a little, if we had all little like Sims style things above our head that change color depending on whether we were being like generally good human beings or not. And historically, the older generation always shit on the young. I'm sorry, but the younger generation are doing far more good things than anything we've ever done. Like, I grew up in the '90s. The '90s was shit. Like, we were assholes to everybody. And the kids you meet now in school are switched on, knowledgeable, understanding people. compassionate, empathetic. They give a shit about the world genuinely, even in the face of impending disaster, even in the face of all the odds against them. They'll still work hard to try it. You know, my friend's son is a perfect example. Just saw a message from you, Rob. It's like he's living a far more authentic and true life as a human than any of us, and I can recognize that, and we can aspire to it. But I'm not sure I could actually do it. So it again comes back to who do we blame? We blame us. Like, I know the problem, still can't do anything about it. Do some things about it, celebrate those things, but ultimately it's like, you know, it's kind of like our time is done. Really, let's let tiny people deal with it. Their turn now. Inform, educate them, pass on the baton. They're the next people to have a crack at steering it in the right direction. It's going to be multi-generations. Just the environment's one thing, but steering human culture to maintain that environment. Like, maybe if we put a giant freaking thing up in space, or we destroy all, you know, let's say we just nuke every data center on a planet and remove the internet and every bit of reliance on it, and that for some reason brings down enough to save the environment. Fantastic. That's in our lifetime. How do we maintain that? How do we stop people rebuilding that? How do we stop the same mistakes happening? That's far more important than the short-term fixes and the small things, you know?
Right? There definitely is, you know, there are solutions to the problems that we face immediately that do not address the underlying cause of the problem.
Yeah, it's a sticking plaster, which is why I said about the accelerationism. I find myself drawn back there because it's like, do you know what? Let's just shit on everything, burn it down as quickly as possible by being the best capitalist consumers we can. You know, let's go out and shit on everybody. Let's be the worst human beings, because maybe we'll get to that point quicker, rip the Band-Aid off, realize that everything's fucked, and something new will come out of the ashes of it, because it'll be truly burnt to the ground, rather than this, like, limping to the finish. Can we get a bit further? Oh, here, let's just stick another one on. It's fine. Bit more glue. It's all good. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I find it hard to disagree with that sentiment. Do you think...
I wish I could.
Do you think that anything is salvageable without going to that extreme, or do you think that it's absolutely to the point where the only way out is through, and we have to go through the crash and burn phase, and just the faster we get it done and over with, the faster we can progress as a species?
I mean, I've got to address the really glaring, obvious point here, is that even this concept is entirely driven from a cultural bias of capitalist Western civilization, which is not the whole planet.
True.
So, you know, maybe a better thing would be to say, will the generalized Western civilization exist in 100 years? You know, will civilization as we know it exist? It's easy to generalize the whole human race, but the whole human race is not the same. There's the massive cultural divides in how people approach stuff. So something will survive, and it will be whatever survives will be a melting pot of all these different ideas. I suppose that's why we make what we do with the game, because for us, yeah, let's say it's an easy get out to some extent. You know, we're making a game, it's fun, it's frivolous, it's pointless. Well, but on the other hand, we're making art and stories, and as human beings, the one thing that has been a bedrock of our civilizations for tens of thousands of years is stories. Like, we are built on them, and stories are our way of conveying information to the next generation, not in terms of textbooks, not in terms of specific formulas and stuff, but cultural ideas that persist. I mean, there's reasons why nursery rhymes now are the same ones that have been going for hundreds of years. You know, they persist. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the ring of roses for the plague, the Black Death, like that. It's a nursery rhyme. It's a bit glib, but at the same time, it gives you some very basic symptoms. You know, it's all knowledge. So knowledge is what persists. Knowledge and stories and the kind of the human take on it. The technology can come and go, and probably has done 1,000 times in different forms.
Absolutely. So regarding, and I know this is kind of counter to what you were just saying about how the it's hard to answer about humanity as a species, because of course there are different pockets, and no matter what kind of calamity comes, there will be some who escape and some who move beyond. But as a, and I don't mean like extinction wise, but like as a world conquering species, do you, if you had to put a number on it, how long does the human race have? And I know this is, there's so many factors. Obviously, no one's expecting you to be 100% correct.
I'm going to conservatively say about 100,000 years.
100,000 years. Okay, that's pretty optimistic, seeing as we
But
have like 10,000.
but in the, but in but in the
How
in
do
the,
you
in the
see that happening? Because I'm very intrigued. I like that answer. I'm not
I
trying
think
to tear it down or anything, but like, how,
I
how
mean
do you see that happening? Would we still be on Earth? Would we be multiplanetary?
yeah. I mean, let's say, oh, excuse me. I think we'll have less population, but then I think we'll have overall more if you spread out to Mars and things. I mean, I keep joking saying that my daughter's got to get trained up for using mech suits ready for when she gets sent to be first boots on the ground to take out the overlord of Mars, which is Elon. And it's like I think yeah we'll do some other planets, but ultimately it's I think I go back to the thing of the accelerationism stuff. You can't comprehend the system, the what will be. Humans will survive in some form, but the culture that we have right now will just be another blip. I mean, you could argue that the culture in the last 100 years is completely different to what it is now, to what it was the previous 100 years, to what it was the previous 100 years. We have a if you really want to stretch it, look at the fall of the Roman Empire. You could argue that fundamentally changed at the time the understanding of the world. Like the whole of Europe was part of the Roman Empire, and it fell, and it fundamentally changed the world as people knew it in that context. So maybe it's a similar thing to that. But there's a really fun little can't remember who said it, but there was an author who was saying, when we start like revering and over fetishizing things like food. So like when the chefs are the heroes of the world, that's a really good indicator for the imminent fall of civilization. Because it's like,
And as a line cook, that resonates. I am nobody's fucking hero, so I don't think we're in any danger by that particular definition. But as far as the appetites of the average person go, it very much resonates, and like, yeah, no, that's 100%. Like,
but it's like people care more about having some fancy food than they do about being a good human. I mean, that's ultimately the thing of it. And I think this, for me, I think when I came out at the end of doing the fine art. I mean, I have a contemporary art practice. I do it in my own kind of way. But what always struck me was there was a Walter no not Walter Boys. Is it Walter Boys? Anyway, I can't remember what his first name is. Artist and philosopher. He talks about everyone being an artist, which is the glib summary statement, but it's not actually true. And what it's actually saying is it's, oh god, I bloody wrote this down the other day. Is the idea that creativity and play can dismantle the world around us, and can dismantle the oppressive effects of social systems that put around us. And the structure of capitalism and consumerism at the moment removes creativity to keep us engaged with the culture of capitalism and consumerism. If you want to dismantle that, then you have to work as a complete social organism in a creative and critical thinking endeavor, which in when it was written was described as what art is. Art is very different now. It's unfortunately art fell on the sword of capitalism and consumerism. But as a concept, the idea of play and creativity and critical thinking embedding that into society on a social level to create this huge organism of critical thinking. That's what the human beings of the future would look like to me, is a society of people who have understood that. Because if we don't understand that, we're not going to make it to the 100,000 years. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes sense?
I really enjoyed that line. Art fell on the sword of consumerism. And I feel like in a large part that is definitely true. And yet for the true artist, because there definitely are people who are not making art for the dollar's sake, but are making art for art's sake. How strong do you feel that that element survives in the face of the current economic systems and the emergence of late stage capitalism and all of the terrors that are associated therewith?
I think my good colleague Ben brought this up the other night. When you talk about people, if you let's just use the word artists as a placeholder for creative individuals who engage in critical thinking and create cultural products of a sort. So they do it for the intellectual thing. They do it for their soul. They do it because they're driven to do it. You know, it's part of their innate being. So let's just say that's, in this context, that's what we're describing as an artist.
Okay.
And I think if you take an artist and you refuse to pay them, they're going to make work anyway. And that, unfortunately, is just the reality of it, which means that they on the flip, one side, it means they get eaten up by the kind of the capitalist culture. But on the flip side, it also means they could survive it, because there may not be as many, but at the core, most people who truly engage with the act of creativity, of making, of, I'm going to say, being human, you know, they are driven to that, and they do it anyway. Even if someone hasn't got the money to do it, they do it. Even if they've got the resources, they'll do it. Sadly, it's something that should be pushed forward. It should be supported. It should be nurtured. You know, this is why one of the many arguments for why universal basic income should exist for everyone, because it needs to be supporting people who help drive humanity forward in a disconnected, unmonitored, unmeasured, esoteric, interconnected fashion, with no real discernible way of monitoring how that output actually affects it, but just having the faith that it does because it does. So they'll survive. That it might be one of the only things that survives out of it.
And I'm inclined to agree, because and obviously I'm not talking only about myself or trying to hype myself up here, but I identify with that because for the last 20 years I've been working on building this world, not out of any seek of financial gain, but because it's something I have to do. I'm creative. I'm always playing with words. That's why I love puns. That's why I love rap and writing lyrics and shit like that. I'm always creating. I'm always envisioning things that could exist that do not, and it's not out of a sense of a desire for financial gain. It's out of a desire to share these things with other people that I'm trying to engage in projects like creating Dragon Memories and whatnot, because I think it's a really fucking cool world. And it's not that, oh, I'm amazing because I created this cool world. This is a really cool world, and I think you're going to fucking enjoy it, so come on in and check it out. And it really doesn't have anything to do with me. It's all come from me and my experiences, of course, but it's not about me. It's about Galil. It's about the world. And I feel like there definitely are still artists in every genre that are the same way, that they're creating out of a need to create, and they're just being affected by the system. But then there's absolutely the people who are creating to take advantage of the system.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big difference. Myself and Ben argued this for years and years and years. We've round about, as an artist collaboration, you can make work, you can make stuff that can give you a living. It can derive you an income. It can keep food on the table in a roundabout way. You can do that. But if you make something in the first place with this explicit reason to do that, that thing basically becomes empty of authenticity. It doesn't elevate. It doesn't. It's not a human being thing. You immediately pander to the popular needs of consumerism, and it doesn't. And it no longer is art. It's a product. And I think that's the big problem artists have at the moment, is especially in art schools. You're told you're a unique and beautiful snowflake who can create all these wonderful things. Simultaneously, you're told if you don't make some fucking products that people like, you're screwed. And that's really what it is you talk about. You can make stuff you love doing because you have the desire to make it, and you can also make stuff that uses your technical skills to make things to earn a living and things. Blending the two together is very, very, very difficult under the roof of capitalism, because it won't allow the creativity through, and the pure creativity won't satisfy the needs of the popularist side of it.
Yeah, it's like you can either create what you want, or you can create what will sell. And there's a little bit of overlap between those two, and the most successful artists are the ones who find that. But it's very much a Venn diagram, and there's not a significant area in the middle. It's pretty minor compared to the rest of those.
It definitely is, and also it's not a binary argument. It's not one or the other. It's everything in between. It's the infinite complexities of masses of moments of interconnected random events and people and places and privilege and not privilege. I have conversations with some people who I know who make a shitload more money than I do, and they often look at me and go, "Oh, I'm sorry you don't make so much money," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I can't even consider that, because I personally find myself in a position of great privilege. I don't have to think and stress about all these sorts of things. I don't have to earn much money to survive, and I live in a lovely place, and I get to make my fucking artwork sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes, which is more than other people who get no time, because they're the only thing they can do is serve society in a capitalist form. And I find myself, the concept of being an artist at the moment feels very, very tricky, and especially during, a lot of my artist circles were screaming when COVID came along, because all of a sudden they couldn't do shows or make work because none of the funding bodies were paying any money. As well, maybe art isn't really what's needed right now, because actually you're trying to make products and claim it's art, and it's really what you should be saying is, what can you do to help society? Should I be going to go and help someone over there, or do I have to satisfy my own selfish needs to make these be creative, or should I go and be an active part of humanity rather than serve consumerism?
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant argument, and I think that COVID is one of those things that has kind of shone a spotlight on the way that things are, and been able to help us as a society kind of see the stark contrast between the way that things are and the way that things naturally would be, and how much of an effect the system actually is showing on our lives. I mean, I can't speak for anybody but myself, but I wasn't paying attention to this shit beforehand. Being trapped, and especially when COVID happened, I was just going through a divorce. My dad was diagnosed with his second bout of cancer, and I'm halfway across the country. When I told my ex-wife that I was leaving her, she called the cops and said I threatened to kill her. So I ended up getting arrested, having to deal with probation and all of that shit. And in order to come back to Florida to be with my dad, I had to get my probation transferred from Colorado. And by the time all that paperwork and everything went through, it was too late. He had already passed, so I didn't get to be with him or anything like that. And then when I moved back, like all of the COVID restrictions are just starting to hammer down on everybody and everything like that. So now I'm in a new state. I don't know anybody anywhere around me, and I've got to figure out how to survive in the midst of this pandemic when, everything is shutting down and I got bills to pay, so I got to find a job. Like, that definitely opened my eyes to, take a deeper look at how things work and what's going on, and more importantly, how things don't work.
Mm.
And if it weren't for that experience, my life would look entirely different right now. And obviously, I'm not alone in that. Everybody's life was completely changed.
Mm.
So I'm not, pointing to that as saying I'm special, but just as, how that in particular affected me and how I got here. And I forget the point that I was going to make off of that.
I think what it did is that it reduced everyone's agency to such a point where there was a realization that maybe their agency is being reduced generally in a different way they weren't aware of. So like your ability to have agency as a human being is reduced by having the comfort that a consumer system affords. Like you can have your sofas and your Netflixes and your nice TVs and games consoles, and you trade some of your agency for that comfort.
Yeah, I think that's a very strong point and very well worded. And I think a big part of the problem in the growing unrest in society is due to the fact that for a lot of us, we're trading away that agency and we don't even get to experience much of that comfort. Like, I have I haven't owned a console since the first PlayStation, and a part of that is I just prefer computer gaming, but also a part of that is like the expense of it, and the way that inflation is going, and as someone who has always been on the lower end of the income spectrum, like there are a lot of the benefits of society that I feel somewhat excluded from because I just can't afford it. And that was one of the things that did originally draw me to, Web3 gaming and whatnot, is the potential for profit as a gamer, as someone who is sinking in, time and energy into these projects and has been for forever. Like, being able to derive an income from gaming has always appealed to me, and I am not one of these people who is just amazing at gaming. So like the life of a professional gamer, someone who's making their income off of tournaments and whatnot, I'm not that good. Like I'm more of a teacher than a doer. Like I will study the shit out of anything that I love, and I will be able to. I can teach you how to beat me at bowling. I can teach you how to beat me at golf. I can teach you how to beat me at pool. I can teach you how to beat me at darts because I know exactly how all the shit works. I know all of the theories behind it. My execution is not up to that par, but I am good at, communicating and explaining that to somebody else. And so, yeah, I can teach anybody to beat me at anything that I love.
I mean, I think it's the thing with the blockchain stuff is it's kind of interesting because people scream about botnets, for example, but playing games and playing games that someone else has made. A lot of it is about you create your efficiencies. You create your efficiencies to efficiently complete a level. Finish a story, build your characters. You're not unless you're really for being facetious about it. You're not trying to take the longest route to do stuff on every single decision. You're trying to get to a location. You're trying to, that's why speedruns exist and why cheats exist. People try and trick the system. It's just the nature of gaming and play. And you could argue that actually the real game in blockchain gaming is the meta game of how do you game the whole system. It's not the instance of the tiny game. It's not the front end graphics. It's not the little client that does a little bit of a clicky thing. It is like we're talking about with the other projects, like the D&D, like what we're doing with the tourists. It's not the singular entry point. It's the multitude of connected parts to it. So if you look at it like that, then actually the main the main thing to do in blockchain gaming is to ultimately teach yourself to write scripts to multi-account. Like that's the meta game, you know. That's and I find it very hard to be pissed off at botters because they're just playing the game as like anyone else, like you said, to make some money, to interact in a way in society. You know, why would you want to go out? Why would someone want to do something else when they could, for example, learn a programming language and make money at home on blockchain stuff? Like, it makes sense. So I don't even feel bad about the rugs and botnets. Like, everyone who buys into a project buys in at their own risk. It's on them. It's not on the maker. You know, you got to go in assuming everything will rug, because what is a rug if not something finally just finishing, and nothing lasts forever. Like, literally nothing.
Right. Like, I still love Diablo 1, but it ain't supported anymore. It's not like Blizzard is you know, maintaining anything on it or coming out with updates or anything like that. It's a finished project. I mean, you could call it a rug. It still exists. The servers are still there, but they're not putting anything into it. But it's still, you know, just as good as it ever was. It's
kind of...
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, like, there's as a game dev, like, I've got, you know, I could make a game. Let's say I make a little game, and let's say, for example, it goes viral, and I'm like, yeah, but I've made that game now. And right now, the expectation in game dev is that if you make a game, you will support that shit forever, and if you don't, you are a bad person and you hate the community. And you're like, yeah, but what if I just made that game in a couple of months? And that was it. That's the sum total of the ideas for that game. I've fixed 2 bugs. I've done this. Why should I have to bring out new content? Why should I have to do more downloads? You know?
Right.
It's like, if I make more content, what am I saying? Am I saying I've actually got new stuff I want to put in? Or am I saying, oh no, the community's bullied me to make more stuff? Or am I saying, oh crap, it looks like I can milk some more money out of it? What's wrong with making a thing? Like, right, some writers only ever write 1 book and not expected to write another, although they probably are these days. But it's a weird culture, this especially how gaming is now manifested, and in the blockchain gaming especially, stuff has just hyper focused into it because the idea of a game not being finished or not being added on equals line goes down. So it's even more a case of, well, you bastards, you're not doing the game anymore. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point. It's almost like the idea of a playable work in progress is kind of what is seeming to be expected now. And I think that this is in a large part due to, you know, the rise of microtransactions and expansions on games, because I remember very well, you know, when I started gaming, games were delivered as complete products because you bought the CD and there is no update to that CD. Yeah. Like, you install the game off of it and then you go and you play what was brought out. And, you know, I mean, yeah, take it back to Diablo 1. There was an expansion for it, but that was not actually offered by Blizzard. Like, the Hellfire expansion, which was amazing, and I fucking love it, that was not actually a Blizzard product. That was a third-party dev. And then, you know, Diablo 2, I think, is, at least in my immediate recollection, the first time that I remember an actual official expansion pack. Because you had Diablo 2, and then you had the Lord of Destruction, which added on the 5th act, added some new characters, a whole bunch of new monsters, and a bunch of really cool shit. And it was fucking amazing. And it was almost unheard of at that time. And then we have seen how that has become the norm. And, like, a game is not complete until it has expansions.
I mean, and not only that, but there's, I mean, the disconnect from how things are made is real with consumers, and it gets wide. The disconnect gets wider and wider all the time. I mean, we was it a year, nearly 2 years, year and a half, something like that. I can't even remember exactly when it was now. Because we've been building this world in this game for like a decade. So for us, this little bit right now is like a little blip in it.
Yeah.
But we were like, you know, we wanted to get in. We were very hesitant about blockchain. Previously, I messed with blockchain as a blockchain thing, like I'd done mining years ago. I did when Bitcoin first came out. I mined a bit of that. Then promptly lost the hard drives because I thought, what's this silly novelty? You know, when it was worth like a few dollars or cents or something. And everyone's like, oh no, that must be terrible. It's like, it just is what it is, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you could spend all of your time and effort worrying about what you've done in the past and how much you lost out on from it, or you can just move on and accept that it happened.
So I was kind of aware of the blockchain stuff, and then Gaz from Criticraft, because he's actually local, he lives local to us. He was saying, "Oh, you guys should check this wax stuff out. It's quite interesting. It's kind of the blockchain stuff, but assets for games." And like, we love collectibles. I love me Pokemon packs and ripping packs and stuff. And so we're like, okay, let's look into it. And we had a project which was I was trying to create an NPC, because I don't like how NPCs are nearly in all games. And I was trying to, actually quite funny, trying to break out of the stereotype of characters being defined by their stats in the same way they are in a D&D game. You know, because like, you have, when you talk about game design, like D&D games are designed, you have to create these characters somehow. The stats way of doing it is a way of being able to manifest it in a human, interactable, readable way in a tabletop board game. However, computers have got different things. Why replicate the same thing? You know, I said this before about the technology stuff. It's about trying new things. So we had this question of like, can you manifest characters without using, the standard stats, intelligence, strength, charisma, all that kind of stuff.
Is car. No, yeah. I don't know what you're talking about at all.
So we were like, how do we create an NPC which does not have any defined stats about it? How do you define a unique individual? And we boiled it down, and we basically decided it was to do with, you know, our memories and emotions make us who we are. In whatever way, they fundamentally affect our decisions and what we do and can do. You know, we can train and remember how to do stuff. We have emotional responses to events and things that happen, and objects and places and sounds and people and everything like that. So we tried to create this, and we created the first version of our emotional memory engine, which was great, but the idea being you give the NPCs an emotional state, and you give them memories of different things and different emotional states, and as they take in the whole world around them, it simply changes their emotional states and brings different memories to the surface depending on what the context is, if they need to remember how to do something. So you're not really good at hacking something because you got really high intelligence. You're good at hacking because you remember being able to be good at hacking. Okay. You know? And so we created a little instance, and the instance there was two people, and dude in the middle, people on the outside. Basically, their emotional states were just basically raging assholes. And the person in the middle was effectively a anxious, tired person. And we had all the bars for all the emotional states of all the characters above it. And we watched the person in the middle basically have an anxiety attack because of the scenario around it. And I felt sad for this unanimated NPC. And I was like, I had an emotional connection with an NPC which wasn't animated, that was in a super dirty little box. And not only that, but as it was flipping back and forth trying to get out of the situation while having a panic attack, it glitched through one of the people and just did one off the side of the screen. Kept on running to where we didn't have any more level. And it looked like this character had a panic attack and threw itself off a building. And we were like, oh shit, this is crazy. We've got to do something with this. And this game was always set in the universe of the tourist stuff. We were like, okay, now let's take it out of hobby, background, personal stuff. And I said to Rob, look, Rob, we got this stuff. And Rob was like, this is cool. And he agreed that in the context of our business, which is the Reality Boffins, we would make it like an active internal game project. So there's only two of us coding on this game. And Rob does all the graphics, and I do all basically the sound, not the sound, the code, the AI, and everything. So the logic, game design. Rob's responsible for all the graphics and sound, and Ben is responsible for all of the writing around it to create the world. And so there's only really three of us, and only two of us are actually coding the physical game. Yeah, we put a prototype together, put it out into the space because we were like, let's try this on wax. I quite like the idea of bringing it, using the digital assets and collectibles. We looked at the tokens. We're like, we don't want tokens. They look like crap. And this was like in the middle of the bull. And we just immediately got harassed to do drops and tokens and drops and tokens. And we were like, this is weird. No, this is not the path, because we're not designing this game based around a line go up tokenomics, as much as the farce that they are. And we wanted to make a game which was first a game and then also had some of the other things tied in from the assets. Time's gone on now. And obviously, say we built the prototype in about 2 months after maybe 10 different prototypes over 5 years. And in that 2 month time, we got something that looked pretty cool. At that point, every single week and month, people were harassing us to say, when's it finished? When's it finished? When's it finished? And the disconnect between, the two people writing a fully featured game and how fast they think that should happen is insane.
No, I want it yesterday, motherfucker.
Yeah. And so time went on, and we were like, oh no, it's fine. But because there's only two of us doing the coding, we're pretty quick. We don't have to go external for anything. We can do everything: sound, 3D modeling, AI, you name it. We do it all in house. So we're very quick. So we can iterate quite quickly. And we started iterating, and then we realized, it wouldn't be too much hassle just to run this compile off for Android. Oh, let's run this compile off for iOS. And before we know it, we're in a situation where we're maintaining PC, Android, iOS, and WebGL builds of this prototype. And that in itself takes up like 80% of the time, not even making the game. Just maintaining the builds, parity, bugs, etc. And we've just changed things at the moment, because we're like, look, this is ridiculous. We need to finish the first iteration of the game. So we've actually pulled the mobile versions off the store temporarily, and we've pulled the itch version, and we've got, if anyone wants to play it, actually, shout out anyone who's listening. If you want it, come to Discord, and we'll give you a Steam key. At the moment, the only version available is on Steam, and that's probably going to be the case for the next couple of months while we actually get to work on the game, rather than maintaining the expectations of people who are too fucking impatient and don't understand how long game development works. Right. And it's a shame, because there's people who have been super supportive, and we feel like we're behind on stuff for them. But then there's other people who have driven how we've approached it, and it's just purely been the pressure, almost like we call it internally, we call it the crypto debt. So it's like we've incurred a crypto debt by trying to maintain the pace of the expectation of that system. Like, we've had our agency removed, and now we're like, okay, fuck, hold up, now we've got to finish. Now we've got to go back to making it on our terms. So now we're in an awesome place with it, because now we can just crack on forward through it. So, and it's super fun, especially since we have clients, we have other work we do. So Tourist doesn't even really get our full time look. If it's lucky, it gets a day a week on it. So, we're in it for the long game. But the expectation of that. Oh yeah, sorry. This links back to the Diablo single game thing. There's an idea which at some point we're going to have finished this game, and we'd love to work on this forever. But there is a point where we might actually finish this game, and the question is, what do we do then? Do we continue on it? Or as artists, are we like, well, look, we've kind of done through that idea. Do we make something new? And that's going to be a decision we have to make at some point. I hope it's to carry on building, because I love building this thing. So, but it all depends on what we actually have to do and how much agency is taken from us in the meantime with from the systems around us.
Yeah, I absolutely understand that. And looking at the time, I see that we are a little bit after 3 o'clock. I'm glad that we were able to steal a couple extra minutes from you to make up for the couple of minutes of downtime. But I do want to be respectful of your time. So, if you would like to have a couple of minutes, talk about whatever you would like to talk about. Ask me anything that you would like to. Let people know where they can find you, how to access Tourist Station, anything like that. Obviously, I'm not trying to cut you off or kick you off the channel by any means, but
I probably should go and put my daughter to bed at some point soon as well. But I know. Thanks for having me. It's nice to have an opportunity to have some discourse, which is a more open and not just hyper focused. Because a lot of what we've done recently has been super through the lens of Web3, and that does inform quite a lot. But it's been nice to branch out and kind of wrap it in a more overall humanity, creativity, art, gaming sort of all encompassing. So thanks for that. Yeah. And I suppose, I would say come and find us on Discord. If you go to touriststation.io, you can come and find us, come and say hello. Generally speaking, if you want to come and play, we'll give you a Steam key. If you want some assets, just ask us. We'll give you some assets. We do have stuff on Wax. We're still going to be using Wax. We are underneath blockchain based, but we're building some quite cool stuff, which basically means you can have your cake and eat it, in that you can play and share your blockchain stuff with people who don't even know what a wallet is or care. So hopefully that'll be online soon, so people can be using Wax assets without needing ever to even think about a Wax wallet even existing, which should be fun.
Hell yeah! I will definitely be checking out the game. It is just barely kind of popped onto my radar thanks to our mutual friend Kevin. Shout out to Prime Rogue in the audience, and you're definitely going to be checking it out, and maybe driving a little bit of traffic that way as well, because like I said, my audience has disintegrated, but there's a few true people out there that hopefully I can show your awesome world, and look forward to that.
I think I would finish up and say that it may sound like a shit a lot on blockchain from a gaming point of view, or the concepts of Web3, but the reality is that there is some really cool tech that has come out, and one of the biggest ones is the fact that it is possible to have true social community without borders, and the blockchain can help serve that and really lead us to a place where we can have sovereign identity worldwide in a digital form which backs up a real form. That to me is the most exciting bit of the blockchain, and that's the experiment we're having with Tourists. So if you're interested in any of that stuff and you want some pulp sci-fi and some awesome music, come and join us.
Absolutely. And for anyone who might be watching the VOD, there will of course be links below to the Tourist Station Discord, to Charlie, and where you can find him on the socials. And thank you very much for tuning in and listening through. Thank you so much for joining us, Charlie. And
thanks for having me.
Look forward to talking with you more in the future. Definitely glad to kind of make this connection. And this will not be the last time we talk, I think.
Thank you.
My pleasure. And for those in the audience, thank you once again for tuning in. As always, have a magnificent evening. Thank you, and keep kicking ass, because you are fucking